The sky was gray, the ground was frozen, and the wind howled like a beast in pain. Mark pulled his coat tighter as he moved through the snowy hills. He had come here to scavenge, nothing more. This planet, once a battlefield, was now silent, filled with broken metal and forgotten machines, but something today felt different. His old scanner beeped, slow and weak, showing the faint signal of a recent crash. Mark followed it carefully, boots crunching the ice. He passed destroyed drones, shattered glass, and burnt trees. Then he saw it. A small alien ship lay torn open on the rocks, smoke rising from its broken engine. Mark pulled out his sidearm, just in case. He walked closer, footsteps quiet, breath visible in the cold air. Inside the ship, everything was broken. Screens flickered, panels sparked. But then he heard something. A sound, soft but real. Not metal, not wind. It was crying. Mark followed the sound, heart beating faster. He stepped over wires and pushed open a bent door. And then he saw her. An alien woman lay against the wall, blood staining her blue skin. Her breathing was shallow, her body shaking. She looked up at him not with fear, but with pleading eyes. With her last strength, she spoke, her voice cracked and full of pain. "My daughter is dying. Human, please, save her." Mark froze before he could speak. The woman's body relaxed. Her head fell to the side, and her eyes stopped moving. She was gone. A strange silence followed. Then the crying returned, louder this time, weak, but full of fear. Mark turned his flashlight toward the corner. A pile of broken metal shifted slightly. He moved quickly, lifting the panels one by one, and under them was a small girl, maybe no older than 7. Her skin was the same pale blue as the mother's. She was shivering, her eyes half open. Mark gently picked her up. Her body was cold, her breath soft, her heart barely beating. She didn't fight or scream. She just looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Mark held her close and looked around the ship. No working heaters, no medical kit, no sign of other survivors. The storm outside was getting worse. If he stayed here, she'd die before morning. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her tiny body. She whimpered but didn't resist. Mark looked down at the lifeless body of the mother. "I'll try," he whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll try." With the girl in his arms, he stepped out of the wreck. The snow was falling faster now, and the wind stronger. Each step was a fight, but Mark kept going. There was a cave nearby, one he had used before. He reached it after an hour of slow walking. Inside, it was dry but cold. He placed the girl near the fire pit and quickly lit a small fire. Her eyes fluttered open again. "Mama?" she whispered, her voice weak and broken. "No," Mark said softly. "She's gone. But I'm here." Tears slipped from the girl's eyes as she curled into a ball. Mark covered her with an extra blanket and checked her body. A deep cut on her side, and her lips were turning purple. He used what little medical supplies he had to clean the wound. As the fire warmed the cave, the girl stopped shaking. She stared at Mark with wide eyes, confused but calm. Mark didn't know her name, her species, or why they crashed, but one thing was clear: she was alone now, and somehow she had become his responsibility. Outside, the storm howled louder, far above, unseen by Mark. A small red light blinked in the sky. A tracking drone had found the crash site, and someone, or something, was coming. But for now, inside that cave, a human sat beside a shivering alien child. Two strangers brought together by pain, snow, and a dying mother's final words. And as the fire crackled softly, the girl reached out with her small, trembling hand. Mark took it, and the bond began. The fire inside the cave burned low. Mark sat with his back against the wall, holding the alien girl close. She was sleeping now, wrapped in layers of blankets and his coat. Her breathing had become steady, but her body was still cold to the touch. Outside, the storm had calmed. Little, but the night was deep and heavy. Mark knew they couldn't stay here for long. He looked down at the girl. Her skin was smooth and blue, her fingers thin and delicate. She was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet she felt so human. Suddenly, a sound echoed in the distance, a sharp hum, followed by a clicking noise. Mark froze, listening. He crawled to the cave's entrance and peeked out, far off in the snowy field. A red light blinked in the dark. It floated, moved slowly, and scanned the area. A bounty drone, he cursed under his breath. Who sent it? The girl's own people, or some alien hunters searching for survivors? Either way, he couldn't let it find her. He returned to the girl and gently shook her awake. "Hey," he whispered. "We have to go now." Her eyes opened slowly, confused and frightened. "No? Cold," she murmured. "I know," Mark said softly, lifting her into his arms again. "But someone is coming. If they find you, they'll take you away." The girl didn't fully understand, but she clung to him tightly. Mark packed up what little he had: blankets, food, a flare, and a small knife. He kicked snow over the fire to hide the warmth signature. Then he stepped out into the cold once more. Each step was hard, the snow pulling at his legs, but he moved fast, using the terrain to hide. He followed the rocks and hills, avoiding open fields. He glanced behind now and then. The red light still followed. It was searching, scanning. Closing in, the girl shivered in his arms. "Who are they?" she asked in a quiet voice. "I don't know," Mark said, "but they're not here to help." They kept moving for an hour, maybe two. Mark's muscles screamed. His breath came out in gasps. But he didn't stop. The girl needed him, and he had already made a promise to her mother, and now to her. Suddenly, the drone's light flashed brighter. It had found their heat trail. Mark ran, his boots slipping on ice. Behind them, the drone gave a loud shriek and fired a warning shot. The beam hit a nearby rock and exploded, sending snow everywhere. Mark ducked behind a large boulder and whispered, "Stay quiet." The girl nodded and buried her face in his chest. He peeked around the rock and saw the drone hovering closer. He needed a plan fast. He reached into his bag, pulled out the flare and lit it. Then he threw it far into the valley to the east. The drone's sensors followed the heat and moved away toward the flare. "That bought us time," Mark whispered. "Let's go." He climbed up the rocks, holding the girl with one arm and gripping the frozen surface with the other. At the top, he spotted an old, broken shuttle in the distance. It had crashed years ago. Maybe there was something useful inside. He hurried toward it, heart pounding. When they reached the wreck, he crawled inside and shut the old door behind him. It was dark, but safe for now. He sat down, breathing hard, and laid the girl beside him. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and glowing faintly. "You saved me again," she whispered. Mark gave her a tired smile. "You're not safe yet," he said, "but I'm trying." Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal-like charm. She placed it in his hand and said, "Mama said, if someone helps me, give them this. It shows trust." Mark looked at the charm, simple, glowing with soft light. He didn't know what it meant, but he closed his hand around it. "Thank you," he said softly. Just then, a new sound filled the air, a deeper hum, heavier than before. Mark looked through a crack in the shuttle wall and saw 3 more drones. They were circling, scanning everything. He cursed again. "We have to move." Again, but before he could act, the girl reached out and touched his chest. Her hand glowed, and suddenly, Mark felt warmth pass through his body. She had given him some kind of energy. "What did you do?" he asked, stunned. "I don't know," she said, weakly smiling. "But I feel your pain." "I made it lighter." Mark stood up, stronger than before. He looked at the girl and nodded. "All right," he said. "Let's outrun them one more time." And with that, the chase began again. A human and an alien child running through snow and shadows, against machines, against the cold, and against a galaxy that wanted them apart. But together, they were stronger than either had ever been before. Mark stopped under a rocky overhang, breathing hard. His boots were soaked from snow. His arms ached and his lungs burned, but the girl in his arms was finally warm. They had escaped the drones. For now, the old shuttle they used to hide was gone, destroyed by a blast. Mark had barely gotten them out before it exploded. Now, they were deep in a forest of black trees with no leaves. The wind had stopped, but the silence made it worse. He sat down on a thick root and placed the alien girl beside him. She was awake, her eyes half glowing. Her skin no longer pale, but softly pulsing with light. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead and pulled out a scanner from his old gear pouch. "I just want to check your vitals," he said softly. She nodded and stayed still, trusting him. The scanner buzzed and beeped, but then it made a strange sound. Bioform error. DNA unstable. Biocore phase transition detected. Mark stared at the message, confused. "What the hell does that mean?" he whispered. The girl looked at him and tilted her head. "Am I broken?" she asked quietly. Mark shook his head. No, you're different. Not broken." He looked closer at her skin. Glowing lines ran just under the surface. Moving like liquid light, her hands looked normal, but her nails were sharper now and her veins shimmered faintly. "Your body's changing," he said slowly. "Maybe because of what happened in the crash. Or maybe it was always going to happen." The girl hugged her knees, looking down. "My mama said, if I ever changed, I would need someone strong," she whispered. "Someone kind. Like a mountain that doesn't fall." Mark blinked. Those words felt heavy. Why would she say that? Because she knew I was special. But not finished. A chill ran down Mark's back, not from fear, but from the weight of her words. He remembered the message he found on the holodisc. She carries the last gene of our kind. If she dies, our species dies forever. Now he understood. The girl wasn't just someone's child. She was a living code. Her body was building something inside, something ancient, rare, and possibly dangerous. Mark felt something warm and looked down. Her hand was on his, and her palm was glowing softly. She looked at him with big, tired eyes. "You feel safe." "Like Mama did," she whispered. Mark's heart tightened. He wasn't her father. He wasn't even from her species. But somehow, she looked at him like he was all she had left in the universe. He squeezed her hand gently and said, "You won't be alone." "Not while I'm breathing." They rested there for a while. Mark gave her half of his food ration, which she ate carefully. He watched her chew slowly. Her movements calmer now. It was strange. She had almost died in his arms 2 nights ago. Now, she looked stronger than before. Later, Mark set up a small shelter between the trees using old camo cloth and sticks. He made another fire, using rocks to hide the smoke. The girl sat across from him, staring into the flames. Suddenly, her body trembled and her back arched in pain. Mark jumped up. "Hey, what's wrong?" she gasped, holding her chest. "It burns. Inside. My blood is loud." Mark gently held her as she shook. Her skin glowed bright, then dimmed again. Small lines of light moved down her arms like vines. Then it stopped, and she fell still in his arms, breathing fast. Mark held her until she calmed down. "It's happening again," she said softly. "I don't know what I'm becoming." Mark looked into her glowing eyes and said, "Whatever you become, I'll stay." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You are not like the others," she murmured. "Other humans. They don't see us. They fear us. You see." Mark stared into the fire, lost in thought. He hadn't asked for this. He was just a scavenger, a wanderer. But now, he was the guardian of something powerfully and fragile. In the distance, a howl echoed through the trees. Not a machine, but a creature, something hunting in the night. Mark tightened his grip on the girl and looked toward the dark. He whispered, "Rest now. I'll keep watch." The girl closed her eyes and sighed, and for the first time, she slept without fear. Outside, the stars were hidden. But in that small shelter, something rare had been born, not just survival, but a bond between two lives, one human, one alien, and one secret that could shake the galaxy. The fire had died, but the cold did not return. Mark woke slowly, confused that his breath no longer steamed in the air. The alien girl lay beside him, her skin glowing faintly. She was the reason the air around them was warm, like her body made heat on its own now. He sat up and stretched his sore arms. Snow had piled outside the shelter, but no one had found them. Not yet. The girl opened her eyes, calm but tired. She looked at Mark and gave a soft smile. "Still here?" she whispered. "Yeah," Mark said with a small grin. "Still here," as she sat up. Mark reached into his bag and pulled out something he hadn't opened since the crash, the strange holodisc he found on her mother's body. He looked at the girl. "Do you know what this is?" She nodded slowly. Mama's voice. Mark turned the disc over and found a small button. When he pressed it, a blue hologram flickered to life, showing the girl's mother. Her voice filled the shelter, weak, tired, but full of love. "To the one who finds my daughter, thank you. She is not just a child. She is the key, the last living holder of our bloodline. Our species, the Vieri, have one last chance to live through her. But many fear her gift. They will hunt her, use her, or destroy her." The hologram flickered, then continued. "Her body will change. She will grow fast. Her core will awaken. She finds someone with a heart strong enough to protect her. Then maybe she will live. And maybe so will our kind." The message ended. Silence filled the shelter. Mark stared at the spot where the hologram had been. So it was true. The girl beside him was not just the last of her kind. She was the only one capable of carrying on her species. The girl looked down at her hands. I didn't want to be special," she whispered. "I just wanted to stay with Mama." Mark didn't know what to say. He couldn't promise everything would be okay, but he could give her truth. He reached out and touched her shoulder. "You may not want to be special," he said, "but your mother gave her life for you. She believed you were worth saving. And so do I." The girl looked at him, tears in her glowing eyes. "Then I will live." For her, suddenly, a sharp sound came from outside. A pulse, short and loud. Mark grabbed his scanner and looked at the screen. 3 moving signals. Not drones. Something bigger, faster. "They're closing in," he said. Standing up, he packed their things quickly, then turned to the girl. "We can't go to the outpost. It's not safe." She nodded. She trusted him now, fully. "We go where you go," she said. Mark checked his map. An old underground shelter nearby. Long abandoned, but better than being out in the open. They left the forest and made their way over icy rocks and frozen paths. By the time they reached the shelter, the sky was turning dark again. It was hidden under a metal hatch buried beneath snow. Mark pulled it open and led the girl inside. The shelter was dusty and quiet, but still intact. Lights flickered on, and the air smelled of age and rust. They moved to the back room, where Mark locked the doors and set up a new fire. The girl sat on the floor and looked around slowly. "This place feels village-ize." "Strange," Mark nodded. "It was used during the last war. No one comes here now." Then she held her stomach and winced. In pain, Mark rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" Happening again, she whispered, her skin glowing brighter. She fell to her side, her body shaking. Mark held her hand as her veins lit up like fire under her skin. A ring of light formed around her heart, pulsing with rhythm. He could feel the heat in her body rising like a storm. And then, stopped. She gasped and looked at him. My body. It finished a piece, she said. I feel stronger now. Like I'm more real than before. Mark stared at her. This girl was becoming something new. Not just a survivor, but a living vessel of ancient power. She reached up and touched his cheek. You keep me steady, human, she said. Without you, I would burn alone. Mark held her gently. I'm not going anywhere, he said. No matter what happens next. Far above, satellites picked up a pulse signature. A beacon had been triggered by her transformation, and now others knew she lived. Across the stars, powerful voices began to whisper. The last Vyari is awakening. And she is not alone. The shelter walls creaked as cold wind passed through broken vents. But inside, the girl was safe for now. Mark kept his weapon close even while resting against the steel wall. The alien girl whom he now called Lyra sat beside him. Her eyes glowing softly in the dark. She no longer looked weak. Her skin shimmered faintly. And her breathing was strong. Her body had changed again overnight. She looked older, maybe by a year, though only a day had passed. Mark noticed at the moment she opened her eyes. Her voice was clearer, her sentences smoother. Some things speeding me up, she told him. It's what my kind was made to do, survive. Even when dying, Mark didn't fully understand her biology. But he understood danger. He felt it in the way the wind outside had gone quiet. In the silence between distant cracks of the snow. And then it happened. Boom, the shelter's front wall exploded inward. The blast knocked Mark back and filled the room with smoke and sparks. He pulled Lyra behind him without thinking. Footsteps entered through the smoke, two alien bounty hunters in black armor. Their eyes glowed red, and their weapons buzzed with deadly heat. Step away from the Vyari spawn, one of them growled. She belongs to the council now. Mark stood in front of Lyra, holding only a rusted blade and a small plasma gun. She doesn't belong to anyone, he said coldly. You want her. Come through me. The bounty hunters raised their weapons. But before they could fire, Lyra stood up behind Mark, her eyes glowing bright. A wave of light pulsed from her body, slamming into the hunters and throwing them back against the wall. Mark turned, stunned. You did that. Lyra looked at her hands, still shaking. I don't know how. It just happened. The bounty hunters recovered quickly and charged. Mark fought with everything he had, dodging, striking, blocking. He took a hit to his shoulder, cried out, but didn't fall. Lyra screamed as one of the hunters raised a blade to ward. Mark, suddenly, her body flashed like lightning. The hunter flew backward. Armor cracked, eyes wide in shock. The second one turned to run, sending out a signal as he escaped. Mark grabbed Lyra's hand. They know where we are now, he said. They'll send more. Stronger ones. Lyra nodded, scared but steady. We need to leave, she whispered. There's an old station to the east. Mama spoke of a tits hidden, deep underground. Mark didn't ask how she knew that. He trusted her. Together, they ran into the snow once more. They moved through the frozen land. Hiding during the day, running at night, Mark's wounds slowed him, but he pushed through. Every time he stumbled, Lyra helped him back to his feet. One night, while resting in a cave, she looked at him and said, You bleed for me. Why? Mark stared at the small fire between them. Because you matter, he said. You're not a weapon. You're not some tool. You're a child. You didn't ask for this. She looked down, voice soft, but I'm changing so fast. I don't know who I'll become. He smiled weakly. Then I'll remind you who you are, the next day. They reached the station. It was hidden behind a frozen waterfall, sealed. With ancient locks, Lyra placed her glowing hand on the door. It opened, recognizing her DNA. Inside was silence. And safety. Lights blinked on, and the place came to life. Mark collapsed near the entrance. Exhausted, Lyra stood over him, worried. "You're hurt," she said, voice trembling. Mark chuckled weakly. "I've been worse." She placed her hand over his wound. A warm light spread through his body, and the pain faded. He looked at her in surprise. "You healed me." She nodded slowly. "My power. It listens to my heart." Mark reached up and gently touched her head. "You saved me this time." She smiled a soft, sad smile. "We save each other," she said. And in that quiet moment, Mark knew the truth. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her shield, her guide, her only family. And she had become something more than a mission. She had become his reason to fight. Far above, on distant satellites, the signal of her awakening spread again. The council would come. The bounty lords would come. But Mark didn't care anymore, because now he had something to protect, not just a child, but a future worth dying for. Mark tightened the scarf around Lyra's neck as they stood at the edge of the canyon. Wind howled around them, carrying the smell of metal and smoke. Far below, lights flickered, white tents, large heaters, and a steel tower. It was the Camp Horizon, the last human outpost in this sector. They had traveled far through snowstorms, broken caves, and dark valleys. Mark's legs ached, his wounds burned. But he stayed strong, because Lyra walked beside him now, not carried, not crying, but walking taller, brighter, stronger. "Are you sure this place is safe?" she asked quietly. Mark looked down at the camp. "Unsure? I don't know," he admitted. "But we need food, supplies. And you need help I can't give." Lyra nodded, trusting him again. Together, they climbed down the frozen path, step by step. A guard spotted them halfway and shouted, "Identify yourselves." Mark raised his hands. "I'm human. Mark Reven. I fought in the Iran Wars, Sector 5. He pointed to Lyra beside him. "She's with me. She's not a threat." The guards looked nervous as they scanned her. Her alien glow, strange eyes, and soft blue skin made them uncomfortable. But Mark had the look of a soldier, and his ID still worked. They were allowed in. Warmth hit them instantly. Heaters, food smells, and voices filled the air. Lyra stared in wonder at the machines and people moving around. Some humans whispered. When they saw her, others stared with curiosity or fear. They were shown to a clean room inside the command center. Mark checked every corner before letting Lyra rest on the bed. She smiled faintly. "This feels like a dream." Mark smiled back. "Let's hope it doesn't turn into a nightmare." Later that night, a doctor came to examine Lyra. Mark stayed close, watching every move. The doctor nodded, impressed. "She's stable, healthy, but her biology, it's evolving." Mark gave a tight nod. "We know she's the last of her kind," he added. The doctor's eyes widened slightly, then he quickly turned and left. That was the first red flag. The second came the next morning. Mark woke to find armed guards at the door. He stood quickly, his instincts sharp. "What's going on?" he demanded. The captain entered, an older woman with silver hair and cold eyes. "You brought something valuable, Riven," she said. "We've confirmed the girl's DNA. The bounty on her is enough to rebuild this entire base." Mark's stomach twisted. "No," he said sharply. "She's not for sale. She's not yours either." The captain replied, "She's a galactic asset. Every major empire wants her. And we're going to trade her for protection." Lyra stepped out from behind Mark, her voice shaking. "I thought humans were kind." Mark pushed her behind him again. "You can't have her," he growled. "I fought for Earth. bled for Earth, and now you want to sell a child. You're emotional, the captain said, waving her hand. Stand down, soldier, or be detained. Mark moved fast. He grabbed his bag, pulled a smoke grenade, and threw it to the floor. The room filled with gray fog. Shouts rang out. He grabbed Lyra's hand and ran through the hallway. Past shocked guards and blinking lights, gunshots echoed behind them. But Mark knew this base. He remembered the old tunnels beneath it. They reached a hidden maintenance hatch, opened it, and climbed down into the dark. Lyra was crying now, not from fear, but from betrayal. They wanted to sell me like a thing, she whispered. Mark held her close as they moved through the shadows. You're not a thing, he said softly. You're someone. Someone who matters. They found the exit hatch near the edge of the canyon. Outside, snow had returned. Falling in thick silence, they ran, leaving the lights of the base behind them by nightfall. They found a small abandoned tower to hide. Mark collapsed near the broken window, breathing hard. Lyra sat across from him, wiping her tears. Will everyone want to use me? She asked. Mark looked at her with tired, honest eyes. Yes, he said. Some will. Because of what you carry, because of what you are. But I won't. I never will. Lyra reached across and held his hand. Then I'll stay with you, she whispered, even if the whole galaxy wants me. I choose to stay with you. Mark gripped her hand tightly. I'll keep you safe, no matter what it takes. Above them, in the skies, new ships were arriving faster, more powerful. Word had spread. The Vieri child lived, and so did the human willing to fight the galaxy to protect her. Snow fell silently over the broken tower. Mark sat by the cracked wall, staring into the storm. His shoulder was still bleeding from the escape, but he didn't care. Across from him, Lyra slept, her body glowing faintly, her chest rising slow and steady. She was stronger now, but not safe. The entire galaxy wanted her, to control her, to study her, or to kill her. And they were coming. Fast. Mark looked at the scanner one last time. Red dots blinked on the screen at least 4 ships in orbit. Heavy dropships would land soon. He sighed and whispered to himself, so this is where it ends. But even as fear pressed against his chest, he looked at Lyra and felt something else. Hope, because he had seen her cry and laugh. He had watched her body break and rebuild itself, and he had watched her soul remain pure. She stirred, eyes opening. Slowly. They're here, aren't they? She asked softly. Mark nodded. Yeah. They'll land soon. Lyra sat up and touched his injured arm. You should leave me. Run. They only want me. Mark gave a tired smile. Not happening. You're not just cargo, Lyra. You're my reason now. She looked down, her voice shaking. I'm scared of losing you. He gently cupped her cheek. Then let's make sure they don't win. The ground shook minutes later. Snow fell from the ceiling as 3 dropships landed in the clearing. Boots hit the ground. Voices shouted in alien languages. Mark grabbed his gun and stood by the door. He turned to Lyra. Stay back. Don't use your power unless you have to. She nodded. But her body had already begun to glow brighter. Like something deep inside her was waking up again. The door exploded inward. 4 armored soldiers rushed in. Mark fired, dropping 2. Before rolling behind cover, a blast hit his side. He groaned, but stood back up. Firing again, Lyra screamed as one of the soldiers moved toward her. She raised both hands, and a shockwave burst from her chest. The walls shook, and the soldier flew backward through the wall. More soldiers came, more guns, more fire. Mark's strength was fading, but he kept fighting. Because this wasn't about surviving anymore, this was about protecting something worth dying for. He took another hit and fell to one knee. Blood poured from his side. Lyra ran to him, kneeling beside him. Tears rolled down her glowing cheeks. No, no, no. You can't leave me. Mark touched her hand weakly. Then shine, Lyra. Show them who you are. She stood up slowly. Her body surrounded by white and gold light. The remaining soldiers paused, afraid. Even their weapons began to spark and die. Lyra raised her hands, and her voice echoed across the storm. I am the last Viari, and I will not be taken. A pillar of light burst into the sky so bright that even the ships above froze in orbit. The ground cracked around her feet, and a pulse of pure energy knocked back every enemy in sight. The dropships tried to lift off, but their engines failed. Machines shut down. Radios went silent. Lyra stood in the middle of the chaos, calm like the eye of a storm. And then it ended. The wind stopped, the snow calmed, the enemies were unconscious or fleeing. Only Mark lay still in the broken snow. Lyra ran to him, knelt, and placed both glowing hands on his chest. Tears fell onto his shirt. Don't leave me, she whispered. Please stay. Her light poured into him, warm, healing, pure. Mark gasped as breath filled his lungs again. His wounds closed, and his eyes opened. He looked up at her. You did it? She smiled, tears still falling. No, we did it. Days passed. The galaxy heard the stories of a small child who destroyed warships, of a human who shielded her with his body, and of a bond stronger than blood or species. Mark and Lyra disappeared after that. Some say they built a home in a far-off forest. Others say they travel world to world, saving forgotten lives. But one truth remained. The last of the Viari survived, not because she was powerful, but because someone chose to stand beside her when no one else would, and that choice changed everything.